In a previous video, I showed a pattern for implementing nested and persistent layouts in a Next.js application. We ended up creating this simple demo where you have a home page, an about page, a team page with a nested member page for each member. Now I'm going to show how to take this same application and implement it in Remix. Remix has a nice way to do nested layouts built into the application, so I think it's a little bit cleaner once it's all implemented. So right now we just have this simple starter, and over here we have our files and our code base. We already have the application running, so I can go ahead and close this. And I'm going to open the root.tsx file. This is basically the first entry point of every single page in a Remix application. This is very similar to the _app.tsx file that we have for our Remix app. So I'm going to switch over to the Remix code base and take some of the code there. If we open up the _app.tsx file, we can see that we have our previous page layout system that we are using to add those nested routes. Pretty much all that we need from here is we need these class names, which are just Tailwind CSS class names to add a little bit of styling. So we'll go ahead and add those to the body tag. The other thing that we want is we want the nav bar. So we're going to go ahead and copy all this. And over here, we'll go ahead inside the app folder. We're going to create components/navbar.tsx. And we're going to paste all of that. The only things that will be different are these routing features because Remix uses React Router version 6, which is currently in beta, but hopefully will be released pretty soon. So React Router DOM, and then this is not the default export, it's a named export. Oops. And we can go ahead and use location instead of use router. So here we'll use location, and we'll take the path name. This is the same. The links are a little bit different. We don't need this nested A link. We can actually take the link here, and it takes a to argument instead of an href, but it's the exact same string that we had before. So we can actually just go ahead and copy this, add it here, then change this one to 2, and then we just have one more. All right, with that done, we should be able to add that to our root.tsx file. So here in the function app, in this component, we're going to add it right above the outlet. That should automatically import it. Let's go ahead and refresh this and make sure everything's running. There we go, we've got our nav bar, which is exactly what we wanted. This outlet is something special. This is actually comes from React Router. You can see it, React Router DOM, you can see it imported up here. And this is how we do nested layouts. So basically the root, again, is the root of every single route that we have in our Remix application. And the outlet is basically any child that we have. So in this case, we can see that in our routes we have index.tsx. This is actually what this welcome to Remix, all that stuff is rendering. And so it comes in place right where this outlet is. So this is similar to the page layout thing that we had to implement in our Next.js application that I showed in the other video. We're going to go ahead and delete this footer. We don't actually need it anymore. And we're going to keep the outlet. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add the green border that we had on the home page, and we had it on the about page. And so the way to do this is we're going to actually need a root component for each of these since they share this green border. The way to do that in a Remix application is you actually have to create a route folder by the same name as what you have for the kind of the nested layout. So the outside of it is going to be the index.tsx, and then everything on the inside is going to be inside the folder index, which maybe gets a little bit confusing specifically because we're using the word index so much, and maybe a different name would be better here, but we're trying to copy the same format that we had in our Next.js application. So inside of index, we need yet another index, and we also are going to need an about page. Let's first change the top level index one to match what we had with the green border. So we can find this in our layouts folder in the index there. We'll go ahead and copy this. And all of this we can delete and change out. This is going to need to be a default export because this is an actual route. We don't need to pass children along because what we will pass along is we'll pass along that outlet. Let's fix that import to be React Router DOM. This is not happy because we don't have some default exports out of some of our routes, so we need to go ahead and add those. we'll just return a fragment for now. And of course, this needs to be a function. Take the same thing and we'll add it here, but this time called about. So now on the about page and the home page, we have the green border, which is coming from the index right here, which is great. So anything we put inside of these will automatically show up inside the border. So let's go ahead and copy that from our Next.js application. So we'll say pages/index, find that one, and we can see that we have just these two little pieces of text. Cool. We are missing the title, so we want to go ahead and add that. And we can see from our root how that's done. Actually, there's not an example here, so we'll just go ahead and write it out. It's pretty simple. So basically, you export something called meta, and it just needs to be a function which returns whatever you want. So in this case, we're going to say home. And now we have the home show up. So let's copy that over to the about page, and this time we'll return a title of about. You can add anything you want that would be input into the head in this meta export. There we go, we got the about. And let's go back here and see what the about was exporting. Just some simple text, very similar to the other page. Great, so we have the easiest example done. We have the home and the about page, and we've seen how we can do nested routes in Next.js. Again, this might be a little bit overkill. We could have duplicated some of this, but this is just to get us to see how it works. Where this really shines is when we get to the team page, which is what we're going to do next. So we're going to go to the team page. We're going to see that it gets 404 because there's actually nothing there at the moment. So let's go ahead and set up a couple files. So first we need a team.tsx file, and then we're also going to need a team/index.tsx. So this will be the actual team page. This is the layout, the nested layout. That's going to be the same across all of them, which is really this sidebar. And all that data loading actually is going to come into place there. And then the other thing we're going to add is we're going to need an ID page, and basically this is for each individual member. The way you do it in Next is you add these little brackets, TSX, and that's how you would get a parameter of ID. It's a little bit different in Remix, but the idea is the same. You add a $sign in front. Great, so let's add some default exports. This one we'll call team member, and we'll return a div and just say to do so that we can see it when it shows up. Add the same to this index, but this time we're just going to call this team. And then here we have the same thing. Let's go ahead and make sure that everything is working. All right, we have team to do this. That's great. Let's go ahead and get that sidebar. There's definitely a lot to implement here, so we're going to try and take it a little bit fast, but explain everything as we go along. So in the layouts, we have the team.tsx. Let's copy all of this over. There's going to be a lot of things that we have to change. So the first thing that we can change is this link. Again, that comes from React Router. And then we have a few other things. We don't need this spinner. We'll figure out what we need there in a second. We're not going to use this use fetch anymore because we're going to go ahead and do our data fetching the way Remix likes to do it. Remix is really all about server side. That's kind of what it focuses on. You can do client side fetching, but it really likes to focus on the server side fetching. So we're just going to adopt its patterns and implement that. In Next.js, we could have done the same thing. It would have been slightly different, but it's pretty easy to do. So we're not going to need this context anymore, which is really nice. We can go ahead and delete that, and delete the closing tag of it. Oops, didn't mean to open a second one. Let's go ahead and close some of this stuff so we have a little bit more space to see. All right, we don't need this anymore, and all this status stuff is going to go away. So we can delete that safely. Go ahead and save this. Let's change this link and delete what we had left over. And again, this is a 2. This team we don't have yet, so we do need to pull that out. And so the way to do that is we need to use a loader. So we're going to call this export let loader, and then it is loader function, which comes from Remix as a type. So we'll go ahead and declare that. And then this is just a simple function, and we can return whatever we want here. And usually what you want to use is you want to use JSON, which also comes from Remix. I don't actually want to import it from there, so I'm going to copy that line, JSON, but this is not a type. I'll remove it up here. So you can wrap whatever you want in here. You can wrap anything that's JSON serializable, essentially. and it will send this along as the response. You can basically get this data out here, but we do have some fetching that we want to do, so let's go ahead and copy that code as well. So inside of the APIs that we had for Remix, we had this handler which gets the team that we need. So first we're going to need the base URL, and we're going to need the type of that team, because we are using TypeScript, so we want to keep all those types in place as best as we can. And then we're going to pull this out. And what we're going to return is actually these members. We do need to put an async in front of this because we are using the await keyword. So we go ahead and we pull out the data, we unwrap that data, we go ahead and get all the author IDs, and then we have to do some more fetches on each of the author IDs to get their name and to get all that data. And then we're just going to pass that along. So the way to get the team, we're not going to use context anymore. We're going to use route data, which comes from Remix as well. Looks like that got imported correctly, which is great. So this use route data will just pull out whatever we have here, and this is generic, so we can go ahead and tell that it is team member as an array. That's the type that this data is going to be. If it seems null, we can probably go ahead and delete this. And in fact, we don't actually need to use team. We can just directly call this. So this member ID, what that's doing is it's basically just highlighting which page that you're on specifically. So we do want to pull that out as well. And the way to do that is to use something else from React Router. It's called use match. So it's a nice little hook. And basically with use match, we will call it down here. And we'll call this member ID. Well, rather, let's call this, we'll get this in a second. But you pass along a string that you kind of expect it to see. So we're on the team / the ID. And this is the syntax for saying this is kind of like the wildcard, or rather the specific parameter that we're trying to pull out. And then from this, you can pull out, actually, we'll just call this match. And then from match, you can pull out the params optionally. And if there is the params, we're going to pull off the ID that exists in that params. And we'll call this member ID. So now we can delete these. And if we hover over the type, we can see that the member ID is a string or it's undefined. And basically, it's just going to look for if it finds that ID and add it and highlight it. And if there is no ID, it's not going to highlight any of them. So it's okay if that's undefined. Actually, that's exactly what we want. So we can go ahead and save this, and this looks good. The only difference is this children is not actually passed along. This really is another outlet. And so whatever is basically a nested route in here, that will be what renders in this outlet. So we can go ahead and remove this typing as well, which just cleans up things a little bit further. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here, because this is not rendering correctly currently. So it's saying route / team has no component. That's because we haven't added anything there. So we'll go ahead and looks like we tried to add that. Maybe it just doesn't like, of course, we didn't do a default export here. That was the problem. All right, status is not defined. So let's make sure that we got rid of all the statuses. So this status was for when we were loading on the client. Since the data will automatically be loaded, we really don't need to do that anymore. So let's go ahead and delete all this code. Making code simpler and deleting code is always a nice thing to do. So I'm happy to see that. Perfect. Now we have our sidebar, and we have the to do this, which comes from this page specifically. If I change that, you'll see that it updates. Or it should at least. There we go. Still working on the fast reloading and everything. So let's go ahead and close that terminal, and we can close this one for the time being. So now that we have that implemented, let's go ahead and add the specific stuff that we want inside of the team page in the individual cat or team member page. So the first one is the team / index, which is really simple. We just have a little header that tells you to select a team member to get started. So we can go ahead and export, or rather return that. And we do want that meta. So we're going to do export let meta equal return title. And I believe this is just supposed to say team. Looks like it says team there, and it says team there. So that's exactly what we want. So that was really simple. We have all our data and everything that we want. We don't really need to do anything with the data here because we've already done it in the sidebar. So now let's implement the final page, which is the $ID component. So we're going to, the first thing that we're going to do is try and get that metadata, because that seemingly is kind of a hard thing to do, right? If we go here, we can see that when we're actually on one, it pulls out the specific name of the member. And so we do want to do that. So we're going to copy what we had, but here we can do something really nice. So first we can import a type from Remix. And the type is called meta function. And so we're going to say this meta is a type of meta function, which means what we can pull off is something called parents data. So let's go ahead and console this. We're going to go ahead and clear this, open this up, and refresh this to see what it looks like. I should probably actually get on a specific cat page, remember page, and refresh that again. And we will see what we have is an object of an array. If I actually make this a little bit bigger, it's going to be easier to see. So we have an object, and we have root, which goes to its own object, which it looks like some data that we're fetching that we actually don't need. So let's just remove that really quickly so we can get it out of the way. Cool. And then the other thing we had is we have this key route/team. So it basically is using the route that you're on, or rather the parent's route, to be a key for the data that you have, because we've already loaded the data up into this point, which is really nice. So we don't have to refetch that data, we just have it. We also didn't have to set up a context, which is what we had to do previously in the Next.js application. We just have it ahead of time, which is really cool. So we're gonna go ahead and go back to where we were. Got a lot of tabs open now. And we're going to say parents data. We're gonna pull off this route/team. And we're gonna say this is the team. We're just going to go ahead and say that we know that this is the team member type. We can pull that out as a type as well. And from that, we can go ahead and find. Now here we actually need to know the ID. So there's another thing we can pull off the meta function, and that's the params. So the params, dot ID. We can call this the member ID. So we're going to find the ID, where the ID is the same as the member ID. And we're going to say team member here. We want this to say team member. Oops, clicked the wrong button there. I must be forgetting how to type that dash. Oh well, I think it's a specific dash that I wanted. So let's see. It's ID, pulled off. Yeah, forgot the shortcut for that. Oh well, these things happen. Oh, maybe it was just a hyphen. All that work for nothing. So we're going to pull off this team, and we do need to make this a template literal. So we can go ahead and say team member dot name. Looks like something's wrong right here. It's not super happy about what's going on. Perhaps we didn't. Oh yeah, we didn't define that as an array of team members. So it looks a lot better. Now it's saying that could potentially be undefined because we are using the find argument, which is perfectly fair. So if it is undefined, we'll just go ahead and say not found, and that'll be a little visual indicator that hey, something probably went wrong here. So great, we can see that we actually have Henry Lechat Nord, and that is the cat that we're on. So let's go ahead and also pull out his data here and display everything that we want to. Going back to our Next.js application, hopefully for the last time, we can pull all of this. We're not going to need that status loading, but we will need some of this stuff. So we'll just go ahead and pull it all and see what we need. So let's return it, and we can get rid of that part. We can get rid of the curly braces. Get rid of all this. So we'll say if there's no team member, then we're going to display this author not found, which is fair. So probably should say team member not found. Otherwise, we do want to actually display the team member. Of course, we don't actually have the team member yet. So the way to get that is we're going to use something called use matches, which comes from remix rather. And so this gives us matches. Oops. So let's go ahead and see what these matches are before we do anything else. We'll just return it all so nothing breaks here. Oh, looks like it did. I have to reset our server. Okay, it's not super happy, so I'm gonna comment all this out because I think that might be what's breaking things, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so we can see the matches, and what the matches is actually everything that came from all the parent routes. So it's kind of similar to what we had there with parents data. It would be kind of nice if we could pull this out explicitly, like we have the meta function in this, but that's just not exactly how it works, or at least not what I've seen. Maybe they'll create something a little bit more ergonomic, but for now this is what we have. So we can see that the 0th first index, or the 1 index rather, is the parent with that team, and it actually has all the data on it. So we want to pull out that data, and then we also want to pull out the specific params from the final piece where that ID is cat-1. So to save a little bit of time, I have a little helper function that I'm just going to use, and it's called, rather it's a hook called use team member. So I'm going to pull that out down here. And I've got this is team member, but I'm not going to worry too much about writing that. This is just some TypeScript stuff. We really don't, this is all my code base if you want to look at it and figure out what's going on, but it's just to kind of give it a little bit of surety around that we're getting the right thing. So we can say use team member, and then we're going to say const team member equals use team member. And then let's go ahead and console log team member just to make sure it is the exact right team member. So that looks good to me. So we can go ahead and delete that and uncomment all this out. I think I'm missing a closing parentheses, which is why I was not happy. Great, now we have our cat. Let me close this again. And if we switch around, we can see that it changes all the cats, which is exactly what we wanted. Another nice thing that we can see that we were trying to accomplish with the Next.js application that we did accomplish here is if we have a scroll position a little bit of the ways down and we click a new one, that scroll position stays. Same as if we're on the team page specifically and we scroll down, hit Puss in Boots, we still are scroll down, which is a really good experience. We don't want to scroll back to the top of this list if we're here because we may want to see the Felix or Mr. Bigglesworth or whoever. So that's pretty much it. Very simple to do these kind of nested layouts in a Remix application. You just have to add a like a team or the specific name, the file for that, and then a folder. And all these folders will be rendered wherever the outlet is rendered in the top level parent one. The nice thing that we get is we also get all of the data coming along for free. In Remix in Next.js we had to set up a context for that, and even to do the nested layouts we had to add this page layout to the underscore app, and we had to remember to add that every single time. So I really like that this is built in quite well. It was thought about from the very beginning, and I think it just makes it a little bit nicer and more ergonomic, at least for me personally. So if you disagree, let me know, in the comments, or if you had a better way to do the next version of this or the Remix version of this, I'd also love to hear that. Otherwise, I hope you learned something new and hope you enjoy playing around with Remix or Next or whatever framework you choose.